Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sharktopus Wargaming. This is going to be the first of a series of 5 videos that I will be making about Star Wars Legion, speculating about the future content that we might see for the various factions within that game. This video will be focusing on the faction that I personally play the most, the Confederacy of Independent Systems, CIS, Separatists, Clankers, whatever you want to call them, the droids, and more, as we will discuss. This video is being recorded right after the drops that were revealed at Adepticon 2023. So if you're watching this in the future, um, maybe I'll get some of this right. Maybe I'll get some of this wrong. I am going to talk a little bit about what was revealed at Adepticon here today, as some of those things I had already sort of planned to speculate about, and then I ended up being right, and then they happened. So now I'm just going to talk about what they might end up being when it happens. It's interesting. We'll see. Um, and that will be true for the rest of these videos that I make. This video will be covering all of the different ranks of units in the game, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about battle forces at the end of it. Next video that I do is going to be about the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, the clones, however you want to call it. And then after that, I'm either going to do Empire or Rebels, and then the other one. And then I'm going to do Mercenaries last. So that's what you can look forward to videos wise. We'll see um, how much I really have to say about all of them. I expect this one, to be honest with you, I expect this one to be the longest. I haven't seen what the final thing is going to be. You're looking at it now, and you're probably thinking to yourself, can a man really talk about droids for that long? Well, the answer is obviously yes. So, without any further ado, let's get right into it. All right, let's kick things off talking about heroes for the Separatist Alliance. In most of these videos, I'm going to break this down into commanders and operatives. Operatives? Operatives. Um, this video, I am not going to be doing that. Truth be told, there aren't that many heroes to talk about for the Separatist Alliance at this point. The only one who really I had outstanding that I thought would be a good operative was Asajj Ventress, and she's out now, so there aren't that many more to talk about. Um, some of the heroes I'm going to talk about, to be honest, I kind of think even then, a couple of them are a bit of a stretch, but we'll see. I think there's a place for at least one of these ones. So I've got 3 heroes that I think really could work as commander options or characters who could translate really well to the tabletop. The first of them is going to be Admiral Trench. This is the kind of spidery looking dude who shows up in the Clone Wars. He only shows up for 2 or 3 episodes. He has a pretty minimal presence in the show overall, to be honest, but he left a big impression. He has a bit of a nemesis thing going on with Anakin, which was cool, and he's just an interesting looking character. This is kind of one of those cases, which will happen for several characters and units across these videos, where my justification is less anything mechanical and more, damn, that would make a really cool model. I'd love to paint that. Trench even comes with the added bonus of having 2 modes, as there's how he appears the first time he shows up, where he's perfectly organic, and then after getting messed up by Anakin in that first encounter, he comes back as a cyborg. So maybe AMG could package this guy as having options that you could build him either way, and I think that would be kind of cool. Um, Mechanically, I think he would end up being a support commander. This seems pretty obvious. He's not much of a fighter. He might have a pistol or could whack things with his cane, but ideally you would never want him to do that. Even a pistol, I think, feels a bit of a stretch. I think the tactical and super tactical droids having pistols makes sense, but Admiral Trench is really not the kind of guy you want shooting at things. This is definitely a backline commander. I would personally give him cunning, much like Dooku has. The CIS identity, mechanically speaking, tends to focus a lot around order control and activation control, and cunning just is a keyword that fits perfectly into that faction identity, I think. So giving them another unit that has access to it, I think would be really big. Um, I think an interesting thing we could do with him, speaking of tactical and super tactical droids, is perhaps he's a way that he can buff. He has some ability that lets him buff other commanders. Maybe it's a command card where he can make tactical and super tactical droids even better. This might be interesting list building wise, where you might take him and a normal tactical droid, which in the modern day has been kind of overshadowed by the super tactical droid and its variants. This might be a way to kind of bring them back up onto the playing field where the appeal is less that the tactical droid is so good on its own, and more that it can be a really good proxy for Admiral Trench's own plans and a way to execute them far and wide. I don't really know what that looks like at the end of the day. I'll trust that to the rules writers to figure out, but thematically, I think that fits very well. This does kind of run into this issue that will come up a couple of times in this series of characters who don't necessarily make sense in the ground combat world of Legion because they're space admirals. Admiral Trench is obviously one of them. We're going to go through a couple of others in the future, but this is our first encounter with this where he really feels like the kind of guy you'd see in Armada or X-Wing. Those aren't games that I play. Definitely Armada. So I don't know if he's in them. He might be. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me if he is. I have no idea. Um, to that end, maybe he could be the CIS vehicle buffer. You know, the Republic just got Commander Cody as a vehicle centric commander option, and the CIS doesn't really have one. Not that I can think of that's at least dedicated to vehicles. Kalani kind of is, depending on how you build it, but um, I think Trench could potentially fill that role, though I don't know. It doesn't feel perfectly in theme with him. Anyways, even so, I think he'd be a really great addition to the game. And I'd love to see, really, I would love to see this model. I'd love to paint this model and field it on the table with all my droids. Um, the next guy is maybe even a little more weird. That's Newt Grunray. Again, this is a support commander option. You're gonna sense a theme here. Uh, I kind of like the idea of him having inconspicuous. Newt Gunray is just a little guy. He is completely harmless, really, at the end of the day. He's just a slimy sleazeball who has zero combat capacity. And I kind of like the idea of him being like what they showed C-3PO to be for the Ewoks, only Newt Gunray would be that for droids. This would also work really well in retroactively making a Battle for Naboo battle force, which I think would be really cool. You could even throw him in there with Maul, the Sith Apprentice Maul, instead of the other Maul. Um, he could have some sort of extra VP card as well, kind of like how Padme has her card that lets her take secret mission, if I recall correctly. I haven't run Padme in a really long time. Maybe Newt Gunray has a card that, you know, if Padme is on the table, you can slap bounty on her or slap a victory point on killing her because he just really wants her dead. That would be thematic. Model wise, I've included this image of him in his cool, weird robot crab chair, as I think that would be the most fun way to do his model. They could do a model of him just standing, but I think there's a certain energy to Newt Gunray that you're missing out on if he's just standing there looking like a goober. He needs to look a bit smug. He needs to be sitting there in his high chair, you know, lording it over the Naboo that he's invaded. That's the energy that I think Newt Gunray's model needs to have. Um, I think that's just about everything I have to say about him, though. I think this is probably the most worthwhile of the commanders. Like if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick Newt Gunray of the three that I've thought of. Just because I think he would bring a really different play style to the CIS. Um, so yeah, our third option is I think individually the weakest, but when I talk about battle forces, I think he might have a place in there, and that's really the reason why I included him. But I'm bringing him in now for the sake of discussing him here, and I'll talk about him a bit more when I get to the battle forces. But that's going to be Wat Tambor of the Techno Union. Um, like a lot of the Separatist characters in the actual Separatist Alliance, there's really not a lot to say about this guy. He's a corporate dude in charge of some evil companies that do techno stuff. Really not a ton of character to him. And yeah, hey, he's also not a combatant, so it's another support commander. Are you detecting a theme yet? Um, we really don't have a lot to go off of for him. He shows up in a couple episodes of the Clone Wars, and that's really what I'm working with. I'm thinking of him as mainly the leader of a Techno Union battle force, because I think the Techno Union actually has enough stuff that you can make it work as its own unique battle force within the CIS. Um, I'll talk about that in greater detail when I get to them. But for now, just be aware that that's really the reason why I'm including him. Again, maybe this guy's our vehicle buffer. When I get to some of the Techno Union units, that might make a little more sense, but honestly, I don't know. There's also that bit in the episodes where the Bad Batch are introduced and that whole arc where the whole plot of it is spoilers if you haven't watched the Clone Wars and you're watching this, that the Techno Union is picking at Echo's brain and using that to draw the enemy's strategies out. So it could be an interesting way to mess with your opponent's command deck. Maybe it's a flaw card. I'm not sure if the torture of a prisoner of war counts as a flaw per se. Um, I don't know. It's weird. I really am not 100% sure how I would work this. Actually, now that I think about it, a flaw would be more like your own flaw. Well, I mean, I guess this is a flaw for him. It's what brought about their downfall on Skako Minor. So I'm honestly not sure how this would work out. Um, but I think this guy could work much like Gunray. I'm imagining this is a C3PO, literally no weapons kind of guy. But it might be interesting. You know, Legion hasn't messed around with this as a rule too much, but I could see him maybe having some like attached units that might have guns, some attached like bodyguards, kind of like how Iden has her ID-10 droid and things like that. So maybe you could have some like counterpart bodyguards or something like that, which are a little different from say Magna Guards or units with Guardian. Just a thought. No idea though. That's honestly a complete invention. There's not much to go off of there. So the next rank I'm going to talk about are the Special Forces. I'm skipping Core, but I'm kind of going to talk about it here as well. You'll see, we'll get there. It's a weirder rank for the CIS because their core options are kind of done. They've got B1 battle droids and they've got B2 super battle droids. That's basically it. There aren't really any other things that I think they really need. So I'm going to move on to their special forces here. I want to take a second to just talk about kind of the weirdness of the special forces role in Legion. It often ends up boiling down to a unit of infantry that are decent with maybe an interesting ability and then get really defined by their special weapons, I find, or their synergy with a particular hero. You see this with things like Rebel Pathfinders and the Rogue One heroes, ISF and Iden Versio, and so on and so forth. Magna Guards and any melee hero, really any hero. Magna Guards are great. Things like that. So these units are kind of thought of in slightly different ways than the usual special forces mentality, and you could maybe make an argument that they should be a different rank than special forces, but I personally wasn't too sure where to put them, especially because some of the other ranks that I'm going to talk about are really full of stuff. The Confederacy has so many possible units. It's insane. This is why this video is going to be so long, is because they're the villains of a cartoon series where they need to sell toys of a bunch of cool, weird cars and robots. They have a bunch of different models for the heroes to shoot at. And that ends up meaning that in a war game where we can translate all of that into different units and models, there's just a ton of options. There's so many options. So I'm going to be talking about, I think, nearly all of them in this video. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, but we'll get to that. Anyways, Special Forces. We're going to kick things off with the Aqua Droids. We see these in the Battle of Camino during the Clone Wars. I believe they were also in the Battle of Mon Cala, and I think they were also in the old version of the Battle of Mon Cala, where it was the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars in 2D. Not 100% sure of that. That's not the kind of stuff that I was researching while I was making this video, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm looking at these guys as kind of being beefed up B2s. Like, if B2s are on infantry bases, these are on small vehicle bases, kind of like Droidicas. Um, they're bigger. Maybe they have slightly longer range weapons, or I'm not 100% sure of that, to be honest. It's hard to tell how long range their weapons are. They've got long rifle barrels, like a sniper or something, but we only ever see them being used in pretty close confines, so I don't know. My thought is that then they're definitely stronger weapons than what you would see on the B2 or a general infantry unit. These might even be in the red dice territory. And probably armor too to make them a bit tankier than B2s, maybe something else. These guys were big and chunky. They were able to just walk down hallways and mess up the clones. So I think that's about what they should do. Maybe kind of like Dark Troopers in that they would be pretty slow, but with the ability to just lay down very powerful suppressive fire. I have zero ideas what their special weapons could be. They don't use any, to my memory, in the Clone Wars. So this is absolutely going to be a case of AMG either just not giving them any, which I wouldn't really mind personally. I'd be interested to see a special forces unit that doesn't have special weapons. I think that could be something very different from what we usually see. Or probably the more likely thing, they just make some up. Or maybe they don't even do that and they just put them in a different rank, like support. But of the things that could go in special forces that are left, I think these are one of the units that could do it. So too with the next one, again from the Techno Union and the Battle of Skako Minor, are the D1 aerial battle droids. These guys maybe could be a core option, as they're not that far off from a B1 battle droid, to be honest. They're fairly gangly and fragile compared to B1s or compared to any other droid, really. Um, but they can fly, and they've got two little like laser guns out of their hands. Um, this is one of the things where, again, they don't really have any special weapons or heavy weapons to speak of. We don't see them use anything beyond just their default laser pistols. But, well, my cat's jumping on things in the background. I would like it if he'd stop while I'm recording. But the fact that they have this really specialized role might make them feel a bit more like a core unit than an elite squad. So that's why I'm putting them in special forces because I don't know if B1s that can fly is something that would really deserve to go into the core slot. Like, just balance wise, I think if you could take 6 of these units normally, that would probably be a little weird. I don't know if I want to say busted, who knows? But it sounds to me not right. It doesn't sound right for the CIS to have that. So I'm putting them in special forces, maybe even more just to reflect the fact that we only ever see them used by the Techno Union and quite rarely. So that's it for them. So the next rank I'm going to talk about are the support rank units. Um, Already existing in the CIS lists are things like Droidicas and the Spider Droid, the Stap Riders. So I'm thinking of supports as kind of the small vehicle tier or the tier for things that are maybe a little weirder and don't necessarily fit as special forces or heavies. Just, what we would call in Warhammer 40K like a fast attack unit. That's another way I think of support slots often. Um, in this case, uh, we've got two kind of weird units. One that I think would be a really good addition, and one that I'm gonna be honest, I think would make a cool model, but I have no idea what it would be like. So the first of those is the Sniper Droideka. We see these in the Clone Wars, and they show up every once in a while. Super easy design, I think. You make a Droideka, you replace the shields mechanic with just giving them flat armor, because they have a shield mechanic in that game, or like a physical shield, not a, energy shield. Um, and then you replace their weapon with a long range sniper, and you're done. You have done everything you need to do to make a sniper droideka. This is probably the easiest add to the game I could imagine. Um, they would kind of fill an interesting niche in the sniper war of the snipers of every faction because they wouldn't be in the special forces rank, and arguably they'd have better mobility than most snipers. Mobility isn't often a thing that you need in snipers, but if they are droidicas, they would have access to wheel mode, so you would be able to give them a speed 3 move for a turn at your leisure, or any turn, but You probably wouldn't want to do it more than once. It's a strange niche, I'll admit, and one that might make them suited to kind of long-ranged fire support. Maybe you could kind of think of them as mobile turrets more than anything, with not very high dice pools in the sense of number of dice that you're rolling, but high value and good abilities on those dice, like maybe something like high velocity or, pierce, something like that. Um, Personally, I would give them an ability like Sentinel, as I think a sniper unit like this that really takes advantage of Overwatch could be a valuable, or standby tokens rather. Could be an interesting addition to the CIS list and to the game as a whole. I do worry it might end up being a little good, depending on how good their dice are, but I think it's worth looking at. Um, they're at the very least, although their position in the army would be maybe a little strange, it would be very clearly defined. It would be something that they would do and nothing else in the army could do. And indeed, I think very few things in the game could do. They're basically mobile emplacement troopers, or very mobile emplacement troopers, which is weird. The other unit is the crab droid. We see these in episode 3, and I think they show up a couple of times in the Clone Wars, but to be honest, I don't remember them doing much of anything. This is a weird one because in episode 3, you don't see them. I mean, they are in the battle, but it's like they're just kind of there. Um, they have underslung guns. And so I think kind of like the dwarf spider droid, this would be a variable armament slot where you would pick a couple of different guns. Maybe you get one that has access to impact, maybe you have one that has access to ion. I don't really know. Um, but one of those is my general thought on what this is. Maybe it's a sort of tankier, maybe even faster because they really can scuttle around, but more of a close range focused version of the dwarf spider droid. So if we think of a dwarf spider droid that is quicker, that can weather more shots, which I don't know how they would make it tankier because dwarf spider droids already have a decent armor value. So maybe they're armor 3 with a red save instead of armor 3 with a white save or something like that. Um, that's how I would do them. And then their melee attacks could be big because we see they have these big claws, these big stompy claws. So they would end up being a weirdly melee focused vehicle, a niche you don't see particularly often in this game, but that could totally work. You just run them at the enemy and they squish them, they shoot them, smash them up real good. Um, I'll be honest, I don't adore this thought. I don't love this unit that much. This wouldn't be my first choice of something to add to the game, but it would be a really cool model, which is the main thing that I like about it. Okay, this is the part where I'm going to start throwing some really wild ideas at you. We're going to talk about the heavy slot in the CIS. Already a very nicely populated slot with the AAT and the Snail Tank, the Persuader class. Two really cool units, two very fun models that are fantastic additions to the army, and I adore. But the CIS has a lot more options than just those two. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about some other interesting vehicles that we could see in the future. The first of these is the Octopara droid. Um, we see these in episode 3, and they feature pretty heavily in the Clone Wars. They show up very often. Um, this is an interesting one. This is a big walker vehicle, which the uh, Confederacy currently doesn't have. This would probably be something of similar scale to the ATST. I'd have to actually look at the size, but I know these came in two sizes. There's like a really big one, which is probably too big for Legion, and then there's a smaller one, which is probably just right, which is probably, I think it's about comparable in scale to the AAT or the ATST. It might be a little taller than the ATST. I'm not sure, but it's of a comparable size, so I'm gonna say that these guys fit in the game. They're not like a big old AT-AT that's like crazy and wouldn't fit outside of really weird, wacky scenarios. These guys would probably have really strong weapons that can shoot no matter where they're looking. Firing arcs would probably be irrelevant to these dudes because they can just rotate their entire head around. That's like their whole thing, is they can just move their head wherever they want. They've got three barrels, so maybe they have like Arsenal 3, something crazy like that, where they can just shoot their guns all over the place. Maybe something like Gunslinger. I don't know, some crazy ability like that that lets them shoot multiple targets. They might be a little faster than other tank options as well because they've got these big legs and they're kind of crawling around. Maybe they're sort of a mid-range unit that you kind of want to have sort of near the enemy, but not too close. We do see them get messed up in melee pretty often. Um, but yeah, pretty simple ad. I don't have too much else to say about it. Same with the next one, the Hailfire droid. We see these in Attack of the Clones. I don't know if they ever show up in Return to or Revenge of the Sith. And they show up periodically in the Clone Wars. These guys would be a weird unit, and I'll be honest, I don't think they'd be a particularly good unit for this game. They'd be a fast artillery piece that can just zoom around shooting their big old cluster missiles, and that would be cool. They probably should have an anti-air bonus because I believe that's what they're specifically designed to be, is anti-air platforms. Um, and they'd probably be pretty fragile. They don't look particularly durable. They got these two big old wheels they're driving around on. For a heavy unit, this would probably be a cheap, fast, glass cannon kind of thing. Um, I'm not sure what the anti-air bonus would look like because I don't believe we have any right now. So that would probably need to be a new role, but I would love to see what that's like. And speaking of the air, we have the HMP droid gunship. This is, I think, a must-have for the CIS. If we get any vehicles in the near future, I want it to be the HMP. The Republic has a dropship. The Empire has a dropship. It's the same dropship, but they have a dropship. The Rebels have the airspeeder, and the CIS has nothing that can fly. So this is what I think we're probably going to get in the future. We see them used way more effectively than most droids in the Clone Wars. It's wild. They're some of the only competent villain performance we see in the Clone Wars cartoon, is the use of HMP droid gunships. These guys would have AI, probably aim attack because they would likely have a what's it called, compulsory move, much like other speeders and flyers. So giving them AI aim attack means that you can do a move, you can do an aim or an attack, and then you can do whatever else you want to do on your other action. Um, I even might consider giving them that ability that lets you pivot for free. I think it's reposition. I don't remember. I don't have anything that uses it. Um, that is something that we see in the Clone Wars is that these are really capable of turning on a dime. They're quite maneuverable for airships, and just give them a bunch of guns to mess up infantry and vehicles. I mean, you can see on this picture, it's got like missile launchers, it's got wing tip like lasers, it's got five guns coming out of its face. This is a vehicle that's going to lay the hurt down. So, and being AI, because it's an AI unit, it could probably synergize well with any vehicle buffing or AI buffing commanders that we might think of for the CIS. It could work well with characters like Kalani, could work well with our, suggested characters like Wat Tambor or Admiral Trench, perhaps. Um, so yeah, I think this is probably of the heavy options I'm suggesting. I think this is the most likely. If I were a betting man and I was gonna bet real money on any of this, I would bet on this guy. I bet this would be the first that we see. Now, I have one more thought of a unit that could fit in the support or the heavy slot, but it's definitely the weirdest one. And some of you may kind of disagree with me, but I think it could work. I think it actually could work. Um, and that's the Vulture droid. I call this the Droidica of the Sky because I think it would end up being like the Droidica. You would pick between two modes for it, where it either walks around and it's a walking land vehicle like a ATST or something, or it's a flyer and then it turns into a land airspeeder or what have you, just a fighter. Um, this would probably be the most ridiculously expensive kit because each of those modes is so distinct that they would probably want to make it either give you two models so that you have one for each mode, or make it that you can build it either way at your leisure, and then you just give it a token that it dictates which mode it's in. That would probably be the more efficient way, to be honest, as I don't think they would give you two of these because then people could just run them in pairs and not really care about the model. Um, unless it did something really weird like change base sizes depending on what it was doing. I don't think that's gonna happen. But I think the Vulture Droid could work. Otherwise, I mean, it's a pretty not too super durable, but definitely durable enough fighter vehicle that can transition into a walker support role. I think it'd be really weird and different. I think there would be nothing in Legion like it, um, before or since. Like, I think even when they add it into the game, there is no other unit they could ever add that would be quite like the Vulture Droid. And it maybe opens the door to starfighters as something that we currently don't have in Legion. But maybe we could have them. I mean, Star Wars Battlefront is really popular, and it lets you run starfighters shooting and fighting over land combat. I'm just saying, Legion should add starfighters. This could maybe be the first one, kind of bridging the gap between what's a starfighter and what's a land unit. Well, this is kind of both. So, could be a really interesting addition to the game, I think. Okay, so now that I've gone through all of the main CIS units, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about battle forces. Before I get into that, just a brief word on kind of the philosophy of battle force design. Uh, AMG has been pretty clear that they want their battle forces to be pretty dramatic shifts from the standard way of playing the army. These are sub-factions that really go hard into the theme of a specific army list, that often emphasize you using particular units or combinations of units over others. So I'm using the same sort of mentality. And there's a lot of units that I think fit specifically in battle forces, much like how the Rebels have Ewoks or the Shadow Collective is a thing, um, that I think work for the CIS. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of those here today. To kick things off, I'm going to talk about Umbara, Battle Force Umbara. Um, the Battle of Umbara is one of the pivotal moments of the Clone Wars series. It's one of the most lauded arcs in the entire show. I'm going to be spoiling it all here a little bit. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's great. It's some of the best Star Wars content there is. It's fantastic. Um, and being as it is quite focused on a separatist planet, I think we can talk a little bit about what Umbara might bring to the table. So, one of the things about the Battle of Umbara is there weren't that many droids present, so we would actually be focusing more on the Umbarans themselves. And the Umbarans used a lot of weird, heavy vehicles, so we're going to be focusing on them. They could have some sort of stealth bonus or something using terrain, laying traps, because the vibe of the Umbara arc is very, it's space Vietnam, right? These guys are coming out of the trees and ambushing the clones. Every step the clones take is seconds from a grisly death. So the issue here is we don't really have a good commander unit to it for them. We may be forced to be limited to tactical or super tactical droids, but even that doesn't quite feel right. Maybe it's a battle force with no commanders. Now that's a weird thought. And then there's this other guy, Pong Krell, who is a weird unit to talk about because Pong Krell is, if, as you may recall, the Jedi in charge of the Republic during this battle. Um, but he's actually a turncoat, a traitor, just a guy who really hates clones and tries to get on Count Dooku's good side. He ends up dying before that can ever actually happen. So the question is, does he count as a separatist? Maybe he's a kind of fan fiction separatist hero to have, kind of like Episode 1 Maul, where Darth Maul never actually fought for the separatists, but hey, we've got him as an operative. Don't worry about it. Maybe Pong Krell is kind of a similar thing, but it would still be weird because Legion is so much about adapting the flavor of a character or a unit or an army. And all of the flavor of Pong Krell is him misdirecting and manipulating and abusing the clones. And it's not quite the same to do that when he's just an enemy commander that they're fighting. It's not quite the same. So I really don't know if I think Ponkrell is a good fit, to be honest with you. He would be an interesting model for sure. He'd be a fun paint job, but and mechanically, I don't really know that he brings all that much to the table either. I mean, he's a Jedi, and I mean, the CIS already has three of those at this point. Four of those, actually. I forgot to include Asajj. So, do we really need another one? I mean, I won't complain about it, but I really don't know what else he would add that's really unique. Um, as for the Umbarans themselves, though, we do get an interesting a couple of options. So the Umbaran soldiers are probably a bit generic. These guys are just the people from Umbara, and they've got decent armor, decent guns. They're probably not going to be quite as good as clone troopers, but they're probably going to be decent, somewhere of a middle ground between clones and say rebels troopers. They do have combat drugs in the lore. That's what their helmets are actually for, because they can breathe their own atmosphere fine, but they're wearing these helmets that are pumping them full of combat drugs. I believe that's what it is. Um, Not really sure how that would manifest in mechanics, but maybe they have an independent aim, dodge, surge, something like that. Um, I think the fear I have with these is how do we keep them from just becoming Pike Syndicate troopers? Because I feel like mechanically they would end up feeling kind of similar to them. Maybe they have a bonus against suppression. Maybe they have something like Indomitable, but I really don't know. Either way, they're not the stars of the show here. The stars of the show here, I think, for the Umbarans are the vehicles. First of those, we have the Umbaran hover tank. Would be a big ol' artillery piece, probably comparable to the AAT, but maybe a bit less durable and maybe a bit more powerful, though who's to say? Um, we see these absolutely mulch the Republic AT-RTs, so I expect these would be particularly good at dealing with enemy vehicles, probably a very high impact value on their attacks, impact 3 or 4. Um, just speculating. Other than that, though, not really too much to say about them. They could be uh, just a standard vehicle, maybe a weak point in the back, something like that, but there's not too much else that's particularly crazy about them. The really weird one would be the Imbaran impeding assault tank. Now, this is the one that I would really love to see, but I'll be honest, I really don't know mechanically how they do it. It's definitely more of a close range vehicle, but it's got so many guns. It is covered in guns. This is maybe something that would have just like so much shooting and would just let out buckets of dice. I think it's just about the right size too. I think it's comparable in size to the snail tank, so I think it could work. It would be a really weird vehicle. Maybe it's even more of a melee vehicle. Like, I have no idea. Maybe you can shoot in melee. You would do some really crazy stuff with this. Um, who knows? Who knows what they could do with it? But also, just think of the model. What a cool centerpiece model this would be. What a great way to bring the Battle Force to life. I would love to see this on the tabletop as a model. Um, and then finally, we have the Umbaran fighter. We see these getting used. I think they would end up being kind of more bomber style as a fighter unit. Um, that's kind of it. It's just a air fighter. I don't know. It's I don't have that many ideas for this because while it's a cool unit and it would totally fit in the game, I wouldn't really know how to make it distinct or interesting compared to everything else. So I'm just throwing it out there as an option, really. Look, they just need to pick like I don't even think they need to pick all three of these vehicles. If they get the Umbaran soldiers and then like two of these three vehicles, I'm happy. That's already a great setup for the battle force. Maybe maybe make up a hero. I don't know. Maybe there's just a generic Umbaran commander that you throw in there. Or maybe there's Ponkrell or something. I don't know. But with that, I think you've got a solid box set that you can sell, and that would be really cool. So that's all I have to say about the Umbarans. But now we have kind of an interesting one. Battle Force Geonosis. I was gonna talk about this. AMG has mentioned they wanted to do it before, and they're coming. They're happening. So this is actually going to be a bit abbreviated. Um, in terms of actual main battle force thoughts, we're looking at an army that, they've got a couple of options here because actually quite a few Geonosian unit options. But this is also where the droid foundries are. So you could make a compelling argument that the battle force should include or not include droids. On the one hand, it should include them because we see a ton of droids in episode 2 on Geonosis. It's literally where they're being made. But on the other hand, the appeal of the Battle Force system is to kind of focus on these other units that we don't see that much. So maybe it shouldn't have that many droids or some sort of effect on droids, like maybe this should really focus on the Geonosians. Um, Before they were revealed, this is the direction I thought they were going to go. But now I think it's going to be a bit more the latter, or the former. I think it's going to be a bit more that they are going to be using droids, and Geonosian units are just going to be, you're going to have more access to them, and they're going to have some unique command cards that interact with them. But I don't really know that they're going to have that many unique units for Geonosians. I would really hope they do, but who knows? We already know the commander. It's going to be Pockle the Lesser, which is why he's here, and he's not in the commander section. Um, I don't really know. He's going to be another support commander. That's what I'm expecting. Maybe another non-combatant. I have no idea. He's going to be a fragile support commander. The CIS has a lot of those. What can I say? I'm 100% certain that's what he's going to be. Probably he's only going to buff Geonosian units. I don't think he's going to have anything for the droids, which is going to make him kind of, I think, compulsory to the Geonosia's battle force. Probably Dooku's going to be in there too, which would be cool. And you could maybe swing in Jango Fett, but I honestly don't really think we need him. I don't really think the CIS needs Jango Fett. We could do it, but I think there are enough Mandalorian options that are a lot more important than Jango Fett. I'll put it that way, which is why he's excluded from this list. But if he were, he would slot into this battle force as well, obviously. Um, the Geonosian warriors, maybe you could even make them have royal guards. I don't know if royal guards are canon anymore, but they used to be canon. In Legends, they were canon. I think that's like a big factor of Republic Commando, a game I've never played. So you actually go fighting Geonosian royal guards, and they had some action figures, I think. These would basically just be dudes with spears rather than the sonic blasters. I think my prediction is right. We're going to see Royal Guards as kind of like a heavy weapon option, I think, because that seems to be what the models that they showed look like to me. So as for the actual unit, these guys are probably going to have jump 2. They're going to be probably pretty fragile, but mobile, probably short range. Maybe they'll give their gun something like, I don't know, suppressive, blast. I really don't know how they're going to make sonic weapons work, but however they do, I think it needs to be kind of standardized and applied to all the sonic weapons because the Geonosians actually have quite a few options for sonic weapons, so which I'll talk about as we go on. Before we get into that, though, now we're getting into the units that are not at all confirmed for the Geonosians, but I think totally could fit, and I would love to see in Legion. There's no indication that these are coming. In fact, I think odds are not even particularly good that they are. Odds are that they're just not coming at all. But boy, I'd love to see any of these units. Even if they just get one of them, I'd be over the moon. I'd be so happy. So I'm going to talk about 4 more options they could add to the Geonosian list. First is the zombies. We see these in Clone Wars, and they would probably be, melee fodder that's not very fast and not very durable, and actually, to be honest, probably just wouldn't be very good. So maybe this is the one to skip. But maybe they'd have something like Scout 2 or 3, something that lets them get in early and make up for the fact that they would probably have like speed 1 and be, maybe not particularly killy, not particularly durable. In general, not very good, but cheap. Maybe you could take a bunch of them. The other neat thing is they've got the brainworms mechanic, so maybe they can actually quote unquote resurrect, not by actually resurrecting, but just by brainworming enemy models and thus adding more zombies to the squad. Um, the whole Geonosian zombie arc was a little strange in Clone Wars. I always felt it was a little too zeitgeist chasing, personally. It came out around a time when everything in its mother had a zombies arc for some reason because zombies were the new hotness of the day. So I'd be perfectly happy if we didn't get the Geonosian zombies, but if we get them, that'd be cool. A much more interesting unit, I think, would be the Geonosian Picadors. These are the dudes we see in the arena riding these big old critters, which have a name that I don't know, but I'll put up on the screen right now because I have to find it on Wikipedia, and that's work that I couldn't do before recording. Um, these dudes would be, spear riders, a surprisingly medieval style unit, just the dudes on a big old gator with a spear. And they run up and they poke you. Um, Pretty basic, nothing too fancy. I think they make cool models. I'd love to see them. Maybe they have an improved version of Spur, though I wouldn't know what that looks like, to be honest. So who knows? Um, Maybe if they went really crazy, they would throw in some of the critters we see in the Geonosian arena, like the Acklay or the Reek or the Nexu, and they throw them in there and they make it that the Geonosian Picadors can spur those units, which we see them do in the movie. I'm not betting on that. I don't think that's likely. I'm not including those units in my official predictions list because I think that would be a little strange, but it would be cool. I think it would be really cool. Um, Anyways, not much else to say about the Picadors. I think they're a very straightforward unit, very easy to add, very obvious choice. Maybe the most likely one, I think, is the Geonosian Artillery, the LR1K Sonic Cannon. It's got all the benefits of an emplacement trooper, whatever those are, without being an emplacement trooper because it can actually kind of hover around. It would probably have some sort of slow, maybe even we see them kind of rotating around pretty freely on their little grav platforms. So totally possible that these would have a free pivot. Um, and whatever we make the benefit of sonic weaponry, if it's blast, if it's suppressive, if it's some other stacking keyword, we just give it more on the sonic cannon. We just make it do more. Maybe it doesn't have particularly good range. We see them being used very close ranged in the film, but in the Clone Wars, they're being used more like anti-air artillery. So I don't know. Maybe it's got armament options. Just represent different roles. Um, that's it from the movies, but there's one more Geonosian unit that I think would be really cool and I'd love to see, and that's the Geonosian bikers. We see these in the Clone Wars, and interestingly, these might be bikers that rely less on any weapon attached to the speeder themselves, as the speeders we see them use have no weapons, but rather the riders just have a pistol that they drive by with, gangster style. So I'd love to see that. I think that'd be super cool. We see them used to very good effect in the Clone Wars. I'm sure I'll have a clip interject me here showing how cool they are. Um, Totally interesting unit. Very unlike anything else in the CIS right now. I guess it's kind of like the Stap Rider, but I think the short range shooting of it and the whole, the energy of running right up to your opponent and blasting them and then running back and circling around them. I think that's cool. The biker gang energy of the Geonosian bikers is cool. So I would love to see that. I think of the other, like if we only get one more Geonosian unit besides the main troopers and Poggle, I want it to be the bikers so badly. I think the bikers would be so much fun. If it's not the bikers, I'll take the cannon. And if it's not either of those, I'll take the Picador. I like honestly, I'm happy with pretty much anything. I really just think zombies are gonna be lame. So I'm including them in the list as an option because they are a thing that they could do, and I think it's not unlikely if they expand Geonosians beyond a single unit. But I would really put them at the bottom of the list personally. Anyways, I have one more battle force to talk about today. That's the Techno Union. I've kind of sprinkled them in already, but we'll just briefly talk about what they've got going. Um, you know, we've got Wat Tambor, we've got the Octoparadroid, we've got the D1s. All of these are Techno Union units. So a battle force that focuses on these maybe gives you a opponent mechanic that lets you use your own opponent's command cards against them to kind of represent the Echo computer thing. Could be really cool. Maybe do something with experimental weapons. They have that like torture eliminator ball that they use in that episode. Something like that would be really cool. I think the Techno Union could work really well and that's the only reason I included Wat Tambor is because he would lead it. Um, this would be another fantastic battle force in my book. So not much else to say because I've already talked about all these other units because I think they also work outside of the battle force and we could well see them before this battle force ever exists. But if they all come out and then later they're like, hey, here's a free battle force for the Techno Union, great. I'm happy with that. Um, to wrap things up, I'll just say a little bit about my personal bets on the future. What of all of my predictions, because there's quite a few predictions. This is already like almost, I think, almost an hour long worth of content of me just talking about droids and what droids I think are gonna happen. Um, I think one of these do I think is the most likely. Okay, well, we're obviously getting Geonosians. We know this now. So the only question is how much. I think I'll be honest, I don't think we're getting much more. I have no evidence for this. This is just my feeling. I feel like if we were going to get more, they might have shown them. Now, there is May the 4th. May the 4th is going to come. They're going to have more reveals. They said as much in their panel at Adepticon. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll find out a bit more about what Geonosians we're getting at on May the 4th, but feels kind of like a weird reveal for that day, personally. I think they're going to talk about maybe some more high profile things than that. Um, if we're getting any more Geonosian units, I honestly think we're only going to get like one more besides the troopers, and I think it will probably be the cannon. Can't say why. I have no real justification for it, but it's just what makes sense to me that that's what AMG would do. Maybe it's because it would probably be a pretty simple model to make. I mean, as simple as any model is to make, right? But anyway, yeah. As for heroes, we're getting Poggle, obviously. That's not even a prediction anymore. We know that. But of the other heroes I predicted, I think Nute Gunray is the most likely one. Um, he just seems like a perfect fit for so many things that Legion has already done. It just seems like very natural to me. I think we're going to see Nute Gunray probably not anytime soon, admittedly. I think there's a lot more important characters to get to before we get to Gunray. But he'll probably be like, my prediction is we're going to have maybe say there's a content drought for the CIS where all the other factions are getting a bunch of cool stuff, and then they're like, oh, we should give the droid something. Here's Nute Gunray. I have no evidence for this. This is pure speculation. But that's kind of what I feel is going to happen. As for all the droids I talked about, don't know which of those is really likely, but I think more than a few of them are going to make it in. And if I have to pick two, I think it's going to be Sniper Droidicas and the HMP Gunship. I think those two are our top contenders for getting into the game. Um, And that's it. So, what do you think? I'd love to hear your speculation. Are there units that I missed? I did a lot of trolling through Wikipedia to find things from the shows and the films that haven't been touched on yet that I think are very likely to show up in this game, or at least have a chance, or even if they don't have a chance, are just interesting additions that I would love to see. Anything I missed? Any units that you think are more or less likely than what I listed here? I'd love to know. Um, Next time, you can join me as I talk about the Republic. It will probably be much shorter than this video. In fact, they're probably all going to be much shorter than this video because this one, I really just had a lot of stuff to go through. The Republic one, it's going to come. I don't even know. I have no idea when this video is coming out, and I'm not going to record that one until this one's out. So we'll see, I suppose. Um, but that video is going to be probably a bit shorter than this one. Like I'd say probably half as long as this one. Um, Let me know what other things you'd like to see next time. Make sure to subscribe so you can get access to those videos as soon as they come out. Like, comment, all of those good algorithm things. If you want to take down the corruption of the Galactic Republic and form a new free state in the Outer Rim, like, comment, subscribe. Talk about how the CIS is based. I will see you next time.